And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And boy, oh boy, Mitt Romney has officially come out and said that he's not ready to be president. And last night he got out ahead of the crazies, including the neocon crazies who are advising him. By the way, they're the same neocon crazies who were telling the Bush administration after May 1st, when George Bush was first told, May 1st, 2001, when George Bush was first told that bin Laden had cells inside the United States who were determined to strike us, what turned out to be 9/11. May 1st, the first time the CIA formally, officially told George W. Bush, and he ignored it. He said to the CIA guys, "You're being fooled. Bin Laden and Saddam Hussein are conspiring to make you think that, Osama bin Laden's up to something here in the United States, when in fact it's all Saddam Hussein." Well, not only were they not conspiring, they hated each other. So anyhow, those were the neocon, right-wing, war fundamentalist crazies who were advising George W. Bush, who caused him to believe, at least according to Kurt Eichenwald's lengthy article in Vanity Fair and his new book, that it's all a scam, right? This whole thing, it's all a scam. It's Saddam Hussein trying to fool us and to take our attention away from him and put it on Osama bin Laden and the possibility he might attack us. We're not going to do that. Those are the people advising Romney, which is why yesterday was 9/11, right? Yesterday was 9/11. And the tradition is, on 9/11, you don't turn it into partisan things. You don't use 9/11 for the purposes of attacking the other party. Neither party does that. I mean, talk show hosts might do it, but politicians don't do it. So at 10 o'clock last night, more or less, 10 o'clock Eastern time, the Romney campaign issues a statement to the press that is embargoed until midnight. And this is just mind-boggling. The statement says, "We have seen the foreign policy of weakness and decline in American influence and respect. Yesterday, we saw the consequences of this perceived weakness." And he attacked the Obama administration for issuing an apology about this movie that has really, flipped out these people in the Middle East. He says, here's his exact quote: "I'm outraged by the attacks on American diplomatic missions in Libya and Egypt, and by the," this was later. He says, "It's disgraceful that the Obama administration's first response was not to condemn attacks on our diplomatic missions, but to sympathize with those who waged the attacks." Okay, it's just not true, but that's what happened. The timeline is people were in the streets and people were PO'd and upset about this movie. The Egyptian embassy, our embassy in Egypt, issues a press release to the Egyptian people saying, we think the movie's a terrible thing too, but, we have freedom of speech in America. But, officially, we're not with that movie. That doesn't reflect American values. And then they got attacked. And once they were attacked, the president and Secretary Clinton said, this is a terrible, this is horrible, this is barbaric. They used a lot of, adjectives like that. So Romney was wrong in everything he said, and he's even got people like John Sununu now saying, I wouldn't have done it quite that way, and Chuck Todd saying, this is a disaster. I mean, I think this is what we're watching here is the unraveling of the Romney campaign. And again, I will say, I've said that 1,000 times. I will say it again. The only way that Romney can win the White House now is by lying and suppressing the Democratic vote. And, of course, they're doing both of those things. But to the issue of the Middle East, way too many Americans, particularly on the hard right, are quick to jump in to blame Islam for the death of 4 Americans and the taking down of 3 U.S. embassies or consulate offices. You know, way too many Americans are quick to jump in and blame. But this is simplistic thinking at the best and, frankly, racist at the worst. Now, keep in mind, this was riots that led to the death of 4 people. Remember Rodney King when he was beaten by police in Los Angeles? That was followed by weeks of riots in Los Angeles in which thousands of people were injured and 53 people were killed. Here in the United States, because of a videotape. Now, conservatives at that time tried to blame black people for the riots, insinuating that there was something wrong with African-American culture, probably created by LBJ's Great Society programs, and we got to kick all these people off welfare. And you know the rant that they do. But what happened after the Rodney King beatings, or the most recent riots in New York City over the past decade, each one following a police shooting, is not an expression of a defective culture any more than what happened in Egypt and Libya is. In fact, it's a reflection of how this country, our country, was born. In 1776, Americans rose up and rioted against a system of government that was oppressive and unfair. The riot arguably really began in 1773, 1774 with the massacre in, Boston? Just outside of Boston. As Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence, when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government. The history of the present king of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over the United States. You see, people don't riot when times are good. They riot when they're pushed to it. The people of both Egypt and Libya have seen the United States support dictators in their countries for generations. They've seen us fund repressive and violent armies and police forces. They've watched our transnational corporations work with local oligarchs to keep the rich fabulously rich in Egypt and Libya and the poor in poverty. Just like in the United States when redlining was legal and regularly done, keeping poor neighborhoods poor, where discrimination and badly funded schools conspire to reduce entire populations under absolute despotism, where communities are torn apart by poverty and hopelessness. Americans have risen up over and over again, whether it was the American Revolution, the Civil War, the labor movement from the late 1800s until the early 1930s, or in our most poor and destitute communities from the 1970s to today. And it's not just people of color in the United States. Irish people in New York City rioted in 1863 because they were poor and being drafted for the Civil War while rich people could hire stand-ins to fight for them in the Civil War. They rioted in Boston in the late 19th century to protest attempts by the largely British ancestry Protestant government of Massachusetts to force their kids into Protestant public schools. Italians and Jews at various times rioted against terrible working conditions, particularly in early 20th century New York City. It's not because they practice a religion that's stuck in the 10th century or because their skin was a different color or because they're uncivilized, what happened in Egypt and Libya. It's because they were facing, as Jefferson wrote, a long train of abuses and usurpations. The match that lit the riots in the Middle East may have been an intentionally inflammatory video. But Muslims in more affluent parts of the world, they aren't rioting. They aren't trying to throw out the United States. At the end of the day, this really isn't about Islam. It's about oppression, poverty, and despair. And until the good citizens of the United States realize that and stop with the jingoistic and racist language and intellectual shortcuts, and instead move to stop bombing these parts of the world, instead help them build schools and hospitals, we're going to be facing more and more of the same. 16 minutes past the hour.